This is going to be a little bit of a tougher video because a lot of people are suffering with this right now, so let's talk about it, shall we? I never knew how much people were really suffering with feelings of rejection, like romantic rejection, until I mentioned dating at all in a video. So if you are to look at the comments on that video, they're devastatingly fatalistic. And there are some really obscure terms being thrown around amongst them, and I think that's kind of a coping mechanism. So you'll see terms like not in the 1%, or you have to be the 1%, or being a 10, or an alpha, or a Chad. Although they're trying to bolster themselves up, there seems to be an undeniable amount of like pain and honestly self-loathing and suffering and even victimhood that's undeserving to those inflicting this language on themselves and others with this narrative. And I know there's no mystery behind where these words come from, but what I don't think is helping is a lack of discussion and openness about rejection. You see, those who are rejected assume that their situation is unique to them, and they internalise the blame or externalise it to societal issues, blaming high standards, not being good looking enough or tall enough or rich enough. But I believe that that's because there's not enough people talking about how common rejection is and how much you have to go through it. And because of that, people assume their experience is rare and unique to them. People don't talk about rejection openly because admitting you've been rejected is embarrassing. Because, most of society perceives that as you being rejected reflects poorly on you, the person rejected, rather than the person rejecting. And similarly, those who do talk about rejection do so in a way which is rather unhealthy, expressing degrees of personal slight and anger against a particular gender, or internalising it as self-hatred or not being good enough. So I decided this Valentine's Day to kind of break the mould. And say, hi, my name's Cinzia, I'm a 32-year-old woman, and I've been rejected over 60 times in my life, easily. There is honestly not a type of rejection that I haven't experienced. I have approached guys in public, asked them out, been shot down. I have been stood up 11 times. And I've even had, get this, an experience when a guy arrived on a first date, saw me, and turned around and left without saying a word. Over the years of being single, I collected a wealth of, let's face it, hilarious stories of rejection that I could fill a book with. And yet, despite my experiences, I never gave up on finding love. I never blamed an entire gender for my bad love life. And whilst, I felt down about it sometimes, I never fell into this pit of self-hating despair. Because I learned early on that you need to depersonalize rejection and reconfigure how I viewed it so it didn't break my spirit. And here's how I did it. What's wrong with me? So when a person is rejected by another person romantically, the first thought that pops into their head is, what's wrong with me? You see, after rejection, the rejected spends hours, days, weeks, sometimes even years analysing why they got rejected. And this analysis starts on the microscale before building up into a macroscale analysis of the self and society. So at first, they look at the rejection situationally. Was it something I said? Was I too boring? Was I not attractive enough? Was it how I dressed? Did I say something to offend them? But then, as, rejection after rejection piles up, the rejected becomes more critical of the self, criticising themselves for being what they perceive as fundamentally not good enough to date or love. They tell themselves they're too ugly, too poor, not talented enough, too short, too fat, not fit, too skinny, not skinny enough, not sexy enough, too unintelligent, too wrinkled, too bold. You get the drift. So rather than see a rejection as another person choosing not to date them for completely personal reasons, preferences, and perhaps even, get this, bad judgment, the rejected person chooses instead to believe that they have failed at life at every facet, biologically and socioeconomically and mentally, and subsequently enter a shame spiral in which the narrative they tell themselves and others is that people are only deserving of love and will only find love if they meet an immense criteria in life that makes them worthy of admiration. Rejected people choose to believe this narrative because it's comforting and easy, Because when you're feeling dejected in life, you want someone to feel a bit sorry for you. And who better to feel sorry for you than yourself? You know, you'll always be there for you. You will always give yourself the undivided attention your sorrow and grief desires. You will always listen to your heartbreaks without judgment, rebuttal, or even discouragement. And your sadness requires undivided attention and space to breathe and breed. And self-blame and self-hatred provide the perfect conditions for these emotions to thrive in. But the truth of the matter is, why you got rejected doesn't matter. Okay, hear me out. Rejection always stings because it's hard to not take it personally, because it is a very personal experience. And we know all of our flaws and imperfections, and thus, after being rejected, we conclude that those are the reasons we were rejected. However, we never will ever truly know the other person's preferences, which are also always, usually, primarily the factor in their choice to reject someone. People's preferences direct where they invest their time and energy. And not meeting those preferences is not a fault on your part. It's not that you're flawed, it's just a preference. In the same way you may like vanilla ice cream over chocolate ice cream. It doesn't make one or the other superior in the world of the universe or makes one of them completely unlovable or dislikable. It's just a preference. But this is hard to get your head around because people rarely tell you the real reasons why they rejected you. So you will come up with all sorts of obscene reasons as to why you weren't good enough for them. And you'll likely conclude that you weren't tall enough or rich enough or thin enough. When in actuality, it may be something as banal as your choice of perfume or aftershave, your diet, or your interest in music taste, because they concluded after hearing that you love rock and they love pop that you'll have nothing in common and that will cause a future argument, so they left. That was it. Most of the reasons people choose not to date others can be incredibly insignificant, meaningless, or even petty, to be quite fair. All of them are valid, but not really that significant. And whilst there are people in this world who hold, incredibly superficial standards, wishing their partner to be of a certain status or look, the vast majority of us in this world are strange little gremlins who just like things a particular way and have weird tastes and preferences, and we know what types of people we get on with and which ones we don't. And that's it. It's not deeper than that. At the end of the day, rejection is more about the person rejecting than the rejected, because it is them who are projecting onto you, are like, oh, I don't like Indiana Jones that much, or I don't like Star Trek that much, I don't think I could date someone who likes Star Trek that much. Not that deep, is it, really? It never is. And I say this because whilst it is always healthy to take time to self-reflect and identify ways in which you can improve yourself and you can be a better person and potential partner, there's also no use getting hung up on perceived reasons for someone's rejection of you, because you'll never know the truth unless they tell you, and they're likely not going to tell you because you may find their answers really silly. Valid according to their personal preferences and tastes, but silly in the grand scheme of things. And that's really not a good enough reason to give up on love for the rest of your life. So I always talk about finding the funny in rejection. When you stop personalizing rejection and lower the stakes when you're in the dating world, dating can be a lot of fun. Honestly, finding humour in painful and embarrassing situations is a beautiful life skill that I developed thanks to trauma very early on in life. However, I thrived off having a bucket list of hilarious stories to tell my friends whenever we caught up, featuring all of the embarrassing moments, such as the man who saw me and turned around the second he walked in the cafe. Which is genuinely one of my favourite stories to tell other people. Like, it's hilarious. The bad dates, the embarrassing dates, become far more interesting than the good ones, really, when you're, creating a life story for yourself. And I became so accustomed to finding the funny in the horror of it all that I was genuinely completely caught off guard when I met the man that I then fell in love with. And I would never have met him had I not found a way to keep transforming painful feelings of rejection into something really creative and fun, and found joy in life when I was struggling with something. And yes, you can spend your life hiding away, so afraid of inevitable rejection that you beat yourself up and you insult yourself for years. Or you can enjoy life and just be kinder to yourself and go out there and experience it, rejections and all, and then gather all those weird little stories to tell other people, even if you're writing a book or a podcast or whatnot. And who knows, you may end up one day telling one of those hilarious stories to the person you fall in love with, because I certainly did. I hope some people found that helpful. Some of you may not have, but I tried. I've been asked to talk about rejection and how I dealt with it, and that is my honest response to the question. Thank you so much to all of you who sent in a request in my Google form about covering the topic of rejection. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching. If you do like these videos, please consider liking and subscribing. I wonder if that little lighty up thing does that. Subscribe! Did it light up? Tell me if it lit up down below. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I will see you soon for another video. And remember, books save lives. So keep reading. I love you so much. You are the cutest little boy. Are you leaving me? Are you leaving me? I deserve that, to be fair. I did deserve that.